so many New Orleans stars, Trombone Shorty, Nicholas Payton, Donald Harrison Jr., appear on the album. How did you pick these guys? The way we wanted to do it was not just haphazard, but thinking, who are some of my favorite horn players coming from a real New Orleans background that I don't get to see play together, but who would create an interesting texture? That's why, when I thought I wanted to have Nicholas on the record, then you start thinking, who would be great in a saxophone context with that? Oh, Donald Harrison Jr. Who should we get to play trombone when we've got Nicholas and Donald? Well, let's call Trombone Shorty. Just putting it all together in a way that would be exciting not just for me but for the listener as well. Nicholas, Donald and Shorty, I want to hear that boss it a challenge to take tunes like Everything I Do Gone Be Funky in Life and keep them grooving when not played in 44. What's cool is that David and James and I have been playing in 5 and 7 a lot. We've been playing Magnolia Triangle and Dewey, and occasionally I would start playing things that I might play in funk, so stuff on the hi-hat that might be influenced by zigaboo, stuff on the pandero and the cowbell where I might have been trying to approximate Mardi Gras Indian stuff, or stuff on the snare drum where I'm trying to blend Herlin Riley and Johnny Vodoklovich. Even though Magnolia Triangle is more of a jazz tune, over the course of playing this a lot and doing different things to it, when we went to play Everything I Do Gone Be Funky, I already had a whole bunch of ideas of funky stuff to play in 5. We'd been playing Paul Barbarin in 7, there's a tune we do called Oasis in 7 which goes into Afro-Cuban and funk, so I had a lot of ideas already together in 5 and in 7, and when it came to apply them to these Allen tunes, we were already comfortable and we just made it funkier. Cyril was a really great sport. Every musician in New Orleans considers Cyril Neville to be one of the greatest soul singers of all time, but I don't know if he's ever sung in 5 or 7, so it's been amazing to hear him adapt to it, and it's been very cool of him to be willing to do that. It's fun for me to hear it, and hopefully people who are checking out the record or digging on all that as well. You tackled Riverboat, an old tune recorded by Lee Dorsey with James Black drumming on the original track. Part of the legend around that tune is Alan had a few different drummers come in, and he wrote out a very specific part that's pretty linear. At that time, in the early 60s, not a lot of drummers were used to playing that way, so Alan finally called James Black to come do it. James Black laid it down in one take and said, "What else you got?" Tork and Singleton had played with James Black. We all hold him in very high regard. We play a lot of his compositions, so it just seemed to make sense to play this legendary tune that James played and do our own take on it. Where did you record and on what drums? Barlow Studio, a great studio in New Orleans. I was in the main room, bass was in an ISO room and piano was in an ISO room as well. I played a 12, 14, 18 bop kit, USA custom. I intentionally wanted to make things a little bit more on the jazz end of the spectrum, but things wound up turning into some pretty funky, heavy stuff on Night People, Here Come the Girls. I'm very used to playing funk with an 18 bass drum. I love to play on either an 18 or a 26. The reason for that is on an 18 the beater is playing above the center of the bass drum and on a 26 the beater is playing below the center, and either way it's a timpani approach. On a timpani you're playing off center because you're getting a more resonant sound. When you play the center of the head, whether it's a timpani or a bass drum or the snare drum, you're getting the deadest sound. I like to have a more open sound, and you can get that on an 18 or a 26. This is similar to what I would do with my jazz trio, but I add the pandero on the left and the cowbell. I did use the pandero a good bit on Night People and Everything I Do Gone Be Funky, so it's pretty much a bop kit, but the bass drum is tuned a little lower than some jazz guys would tune it. Even though I'm playing with a grand piano, upright bass and playing a bop kit, we still dip into some of the New Orleans second line stuff, some of the Mardi Gras Indian stuff, some of the funkier stuff, so I still like to have my 18 tuned a little on the bigger, open, low-end side than some people might tune a bop kit. With New Orleans musicians in general, and Alan Toussaint in particular, there's that ability to freely cross between jazz, funk, and R&B. If you want to work in New Orleans, you need to be adept at playing all of those different styles. I would like to think that, as I develop, as I get older, I've gotten more deft at blurring those lines to where I'm much more comfortable switching from brushes to playing with sticks with my pandero and my cowbell. It's all just different colors in my palette now, whereas 4-5 years ago when I started concentrating more on the jazz, it was a little more delineated. It's all music, it's all drums. To put together a record that has got 4 on the floor on it with Night People and then 58 funk and Everything I Do Gone Be Funky, and then brushes, ballads with all these things and with you in mind, if I can make all that work on one record and make it very natural and not feel forced, then hopefully I'm getting somewhere. Where do you find inspiration and ideas for your brushes playing? That's a great question. When I finished Groove Alchemy, I felt like I'd put myself through a doctoral program on funk drumming, and after I got done I was like, okay, I don't want to do anything like that for a while. About 2 weeks later I was like, okay, what next? I started thinking I'd like to put the jazz side of my playing through more of a doctoral program, and that include the brush end of things. I started going through every brush DVD and book that I could find, but then I started reaching out to all of my drum buddies who are also super into brushes. To make a long story short, I've had hotel room hangs where we show each other stuff with Steve Smith, John Riley, Russ Miller. Believe it or not, Jason Sutter is a great brush player who's been studying with Jeff Hamilton. I would go to Jeff Hamilton's house and wet open up wing. As the sun went down I'd say, Jeff, there's a couple of things I want to show you that I've been working on with brushes, knowing that I'm inviting myself to the lion's den. We'd go into his drum room, which is on the second floor of his barn. I'd show him some things I'd been working on. He'd be sitting on the arm of his armchair sipping his glass of wine, smiling. That's pretty cool. You need to get more lift in your right hand and you need to get more snap in your left hand. I'll turn the brushes around and hand them to him and say, oh yeah, show me. He laughs. Oh, it's going to be like that, huh? Yeah, it's going to be exactly like thought. He just take from all this. And of course Florian Alexander Uzzern, the German guy who has come up with some really interesting approaches on brushes, and I try to figure out how to apply it to what I'm doing, mixing some of Florian sweeps with Jeff Hamilton sweeps and coming up with how to play all the stickings that I've been playing over the years, all of the Johnny Vidakovich stickings and all of my variations. Of course, I went through Ed Thigpen's book on DVD and there are several other books I went through. I just tried to absorb everything I possibly could, and then put my own spin on it.